The growl of motorcycles echoed as a gang of bikers rolled into the weathered gas station at the town's edge. The sun blazed, making heat waves dance off the fractured pavement. Just another blistering summer day in this quiet desert town, or so it appeared. Among the sea of leather jackets and bandanas, one figure stood out, a man in pristine military uniform filling up his pickup, his posture rigid even in the scorching heat. The soldier's presence didn't escape the attention of the rowdy bikers who had just arrived. As they dismounted their gleaming bikes, their eyes fixed on the uniformed man. Whispers and snickers rippled through the group. One of them, a burly man with a thick beard and inked arms, nudged his buddies, jerking his head towards the soldier, a mischievous grin spreading across his face, a clear sign of trouble. The soldier, seemingly oblivious to the attention, calmly replaced the gas nozzle and headed inside to pay. The air conditioning was a welcome relief from the blistering heat. He approached the counter, fishing for his wallet. The cashier, a young woman with weary eyes, managed a small smile as she rang up his purchase. Just as he was about to hand over the cash, a commotion outside caught their attention. The soldier's eyes narrowed as he glanced out the window. The bikers were circling his truck like vultures, their laughter carrying through the glass. One of them had picked up the gas nozzle, pretending to spray the vehicle, while another made obscene gestures towards the station. The cashier's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "Those guys have been causing trouble around here lately," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nobody wants to stand up to them." The soldier's jaw clenched, a flicker of something dangerous passing through his eyes. He turned back to the cashier, his voice calm but tinged with steel. "Ma'am, I apologize in advance for any disturbance I might cause." With that, he strode towards the door, his movements purposeful and controlled. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped out into the heat once more, the sound seeming to herald the confrontation to come. The bikers fell silent as the soldier approached, their smirks fading slightly in the face of his unwavering gaze. The bearded leader, however, huffed out his chest and stepped forward, clearly relishing the challenge. "Well, the biker drawled, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "Look what we have here, boys. A real-life G.I. Joe. Tell me, soldier boy, you lost or something? This ain't no army base." The soldier remained silent, scanning the group, assessing the threat. There were 6 of them, all big, all mean-looking, but there was something in the soldier's demeanor that gave them pause. He didn't look scared. If anything, he looked ready. "What's the matter?" Another biker chimed in, emboldened by his leader's taunt. "Cat got your tongue. Or they don't teach you jarheads how to talk to civilians." A small crowd had begun to gather at a safe distance, curious onlookers drawn by the tension in the air. The cashier peered nervously through the window, her hand hovering over the phone, ready to call for help if things escalated. The soldier finally spoke, his voice low and steady. "Gentlemen, I'm going to ask you once and only once to step away from my vehicle and leave this establishment. I have no quarrel with you, but I won't hesitate to defend myself if necessary." His words hung in the air for a moment, the threat implicit but clear. The bikers exchanged glances, some of them shifting uneasily, but their leader wasn't backing down. He took another step closer, invading the soldier's personal space. "Oh yeah," the bearded man sneered, his breath hot on the soldier's face. "And what exactly are you going to do about it, tough guy? In case you haven't noticed, you're outnumbered." A tense silence fell over the gas station as the onlookers held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The soldier didn't flinch, didn't back down. He met the biker's gaze squarely, his voice calm but filled with a quiet intensity that sent a shiver down the spines of those watching. "Numbers don't mean much to a man who's faced down insurgents in the mountains of Afghanistan," the soldier said softly. "Now, I'll say it one more time. Back off." Something in his tone made the biker leader hesitate for the first time. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but he was in too deep now. His pride was on the line, in front of his crew. He couldn't back down without losing face. With a growl of frustration, the biker shoved the soldier hard, expecting him to stumble back. But the soldier didn't budge an inch. Instead, faster than anyone could follow, his hand shot out, gripping the biker's wrist in an iron hold. The biker's eyes widened in surprise and pain. He tried to pull away, but the soldier's grip was unyielding. The other bikers tensed, ready to jump in. "Last chance," the soldier said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Walk away now, and we can all pretend this never happened." For a moment, it seemed like the biker might actually see reason. But then, with a roar of anger, he swung his free hand towards the soldier's face. What happened next would be talked about in that small town for years to come. The soldier moved with a speed and precision that left the onlookers gasping. In a blur of motion, he sidestepped the punch, using the biker's momentum against him. Before anyone could blink, the burly man was on the ground, face down, with the soldier's knee planted firmly in his back. The other bikers surged forward, but the soldier's voice cracked like a whip. "Unless you want to join your friend here, I suggest you stay right where you are." There was something in his tone, a hint of the battles he'd fought and the things he'd seen, that made them freeze in their tracks. This was no ordinary man they were dealing with. This was a trained warrior, someone who had stared death in the face and come out the other side. The bearded biker struggled beneath the soldier, his face red with exertion and humiliation. "Get off me, you bastard," he snarled. The soldier leaned down, his words for the biker's ear alone. "Listen carefully. I've given you multiple chances to walk away. Now, you're going to make a choice. We can end this here, and you and your friends can ride off and never come back to this town, or we can see how this plays out, and trust me, you won't like the ending." As the tension reached its breaking point, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone, probably the cashier, had called the police. The soldier's gaze swept over the other bikers, daring them to make a move. In that moment, with their leader pinned and the law on its way, the fight seemed to go out of them. They backed away, hands raised in surrender. The soldier had won, not just physically but psychologically. As the police cars pulled into the gas station, kicking up dust, the onlookers began to murmur excitedly. They had just witnessed something extraordinary, a David versus Goliath moment that would become local legend. But as the dust settled, and the authorities took control of the situation, one question lingered in everyone's mind. Who was this mysterious soldier, and what had brought him to this small town? The soldier and the biker's inevitable quest for revenge would set off a chain of events that would change the quiet town forever. As the police cars rolled to a stop, their lights painting the gas station in flashes of red and blue, the soldier slowly released his hold on the biker leader. He stood up, his movements deliberate and controlled, hands visible to show he wasn't a threat. The other bikers shuffled nervously, caught between wanting to help their fallen comrade and fear of the consequences. Two officers stepped out of the lead car, hands resting cautiously on their holsters as they surveyed the scene. The older of the two, a grizzled veteran with salt and pepper hair, approached the soldier first. His keen eyes took in the military fatigues, the ramrod straight posture, and the calm demeanor of the man before him. "What's going on here?" the officer asked, his tone professional but wary. The soldier met his gaze steadily. "Just a misunderstanding, sir. These gentlemen and I had a disagreement, but I believe we've reached an understanding now." The biker leader, now on his feet and rubbing his sore arm, snorted in derision. "Understanding? This psycho attacked me." The younger officer moved to intercept the advancing bikers, his hand raised in a warning gesture. "Everyone, stay where you are. We're going to sort this out calmly." As the officers began taking statements from those involved, the gathered witnesses whispered among themselves, and the story of what had transpired spread quickly, growing more elaborate with each retelling. By the time the last statement was taken, the soldier had become a larger-than-life figure in the eyes of the townsfolk. The older officer pulled the soldier aside, his voice low. "Look, son, I appreciate you standing up to these troublemakers. They've been a thorn in our side for months, but I can't condone vigilantism, even from a military man." The soldier nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I assure you, sir, that wasn't my intention. I only wanted to defuse the situation." The officer sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I believe you, but this isn't over. Those bikers are part of a larger group that's been moving into the area. They're not going to take this lying down." As if on cue, the rumble of more motorcycles filled the air. A dozen riders pulled into the gas station, their bikes gleaming in the afternoon sun. At their head was a man whose very presence commanded attention. Tall and lean, with a face weathered by years on the road, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a born leader. The newcomer dismounted, his eyes scanning the scene before settling on the soldier. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of his mouth as he approached. Well, looks like we got ourselves a real-life hero in town." The soldier remained silent, his posture tense but ready. The biker leader, who had been pinned earlier, scrambled to his feet, a mixture of relief and embarrassment on his face. "Boss, he started, but the newcomer silenced him with a look. "I can see you boys have had an eventful afternoon," the biker boss said, his tone deceptively light. "Care to fill me in on what's been happening in my absence?" As the situation was explained, the biker boss's expression remained unreadable. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving the soldier's face. When the tale was done, he let out a low whistle. "Impressive," he said, nodding towards the soldier. The soldier's reputation had preceded him, and the biker boss's words were laced with a mix of admiration and warning. "Not many men could take on 6 of my boys and come out on top. You've got skills, I'll give you that." The compliment hung in the air, heavy with an undercurrent of threat. The soldier inclined his head slightly, but remained silent, wary of the man before him. The biker boss turned to the police officers, his demeanor changing to one of polite concern. "Officers, I hope my boys haven't caused too much trouble. We're just passing through, you understand, and no need for any of this to go further, is there?" The older officer frowned, clearly torn between his duty and the desire to avoid escalating the situation. "That depends on whether anyone wants to press charges." All eyes turned to the soldier, who stood there considering his options, aware that his decision could have far-reaching consequences for the town and its people. After a moment, he shook his head. "No charges. Like I said, it was just a misunderstanding." The biker boss clapped his hands together, a smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Wonderful. Then I'd say our business here is concluded. Boys, mount up. We've got places to be." As the bikers prepared to leave, the boss approached the soldier one last time. He leaned in close, his voice pitched low so only the soldier could hear. "You've made quite an impression, my friend. Let me give you some friendly advice. This town, it's going to be ours soon enough. You'd do well to stay out of our way." With that, he turned and strode back to his bike. The roar of engines filled the air once more as the bikers rode off, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a sense of unfinished business. As the crowd began to disperse and the police prepared to leave, the old officer approached the soldier one last time. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest, son. Those men, they're not going to forget this, and their boss, he's not someone to be trifled with." The soldier nodded, his expression grim. "I understand, sir, but I couldn't stand by and do nothing." The officer sighed, a mix of admiration and concern in his eyes. "No, I suppose you couldn't. Just watch your back, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to call us." As the last of the police cars pulled away, the soldier was left alone at the gas station. The cashier, who had watched the entire scene unfold, approached him hesitantly. "That was incredible," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I've never seen anyone stand up to them like that. But what happens now?" The soldier turned to her, a small reassuring smile on his face. "Now we wait and we prepare." As he drove away from the gas station, The soldier's mind was racing. He had come to this small town looking for peace, a place to heal from the scars of war. Instead, he had found a community under siege, terrorized by men who thought might made right. He knew he should leave, move on to another town and leave this fight behind. But something held him back. Maybe it was the look of hope in the cashier's eyes, or the quiet desperation he had sensed in the townspeople, or maybe it was simply that he was tired of running, tired of turning his back on those who needed help. Whatever the reason, as he pulled into the driveway of the small house he had rented on the outskirts of town, the soldier made a decision. He wasn't going anywhere. This town needed someone to stand up for it, and he was just the man for the job. But as night fell and the town settled into an uneasy quiet, questions lingered. Who was this mysterious soldier? What had brought him to this small desert town? And more importantly, what would happen when the bikers inevitably returned, seeking revenge? The battle at the gas station was over, but the war for the soul of the town was just beginning. And as the soldier prepared for what was to come, he knew that the hardest fights were still ahead. The following days in the small desert town were charged with an electric tension as word of the confrontation at the gas station spread like wildfire, and a mysterious soldier became the talk of every conversation. At Mabel's diner, where everyone knows everyone, Jack sat alone in a corner booth, his coffee slowly cooling as he watched the morning crowd filter in. Some folks saw him as a hero for standing up to the local biker gang. Others thought he'd just brought trouble. When the bell over the door rang, in walked Sheriff Tom Hansen, the same sheriff Jack had crossed paths with over at the gas station. Their eyes met, and after a moment, Sheriff Hansen made his way over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, sliding into the booth without waiting for a response. Jack gave a nod, nudging a menu toward him. "You know," the sheriff began, keeping his voice low, "I never got your name back at the station." Jack paused, set his coffee down, and replied, Jack Reeves." Sheriff Hansen gave a small nod, a faint smile touching his lined face. "Well, Jack, you're quite the talk around here." Not everyone's thrilled, though. Just then, the diner door swung open again, and a hush fell over the place. A crew of men in leather jackets strode in, eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Jack and the sheriff. Leading them was a wiry guy with a snake tattoo winding up his neck. He stopped at their table and sneered. "Look who's playing town hero. You enjoying the attention, soldier boy?" Jack stayed calm, his gaze steady. "Just having some breakfast. There's an empty table if you'd like." The biker's eyes narrowed, but before he could fire back, Sheriff Hansen jumped in. "Got a problem here, fellas." For a moment, tension hung heavy, but then the biker straightened, flashing a cold grin. "No problem at all, Sheriff. Just giving a warm welcome." With a final glare at Jack, he and his crew settled at a booth across the diner. When the regular chatter picked up again, Hansen leaned closer, voice a little rough. "That's Viper, one of the big guys in their ranks. You've put a target on your back, Jack." Jack's face hardened, but he only nodded. Figured as much. Didn't seem right to just stand by. The sheriff sighed, rubbing his temples. "I get it, but this town's complicated. The bikers have their hands in everything. Some folks are scared, but others, well, they profit from the arrangement." Before Jack could answer, their waitress came over. It was Sarah, the cashier from the gas station. She lit up when she saw him. "Glad you're all right," she said, a touch of pink in her cheeks. "After that mess, I was worried they'd come after you." Jack offered a reassuring smile. "I can handle myself, but I appreciate it." After taking their orders, Sarah headed off, and Hansen gave Jack a knowing look. "She's a good kid. Her brother's mixed up with the bikers, though. Lot of young folks get drawn in by the money, the thrill. They don't see the cost until it's too late." Suddenly, a commotion came from the bikers' table. Viper had a young guy by the collar, his voice a low growl. "You think you can just leave? Nobody walks out unless the boss says so." Jack was on his feet, But Sheriff Hansen grabbed his arm. "Don't," he cautioned. "This isn't your fight." But Jack caught the young man's desperate gaze from across the diner. Ignoring the sheriff, he walked over. "Let him go," he said, his tone calm yet firm. Viper turned, his face twisted in anger and a hint of fear. "You again? Mind your own business, soldier boy. This doesn't concern you. When you're roughing someone up in public, it's everyone's business," Jack replied, unmoved. The room went quiet, everyone waiting to see what would unfold. Viper's hold loosened, but his glare stayed hard. "You have no clue what you're getting into," he snarled. "This is bigger than you, bigger than this whole damn town." Before Jack could answer, Sheriff Hansen appeared beside him, his hand on his holster. "All right, that's enough. Viper, you and your boys need to leave. Now." For a moment, Viper seemed to consider refusing, but he let go, shoving the young guy away. "This isn't over," he warned, pointing at Jack. "You just made a big mistake." As the bikers filed out, the young man Viper had been hassling came over, looking both scared and grateful. "Thanks, mister. I didn't know what to do." Jack gave him a once-over. He couldn't have been more than 20, with a lanky build that spoke of a recent growth spurt. "What's your name, son?" "Tommy," he mumbled, glancing nervously toward the door. I need help." Tommy's voice cracked, his eyes darting nervously around the empty street. Jack took a step forward, his gaze steady. "What kind of help, Tommy?" He kept his tone calm, though every instinct told him this kid was in deep. Tommy glanced back over his shoulder before whispering, They're planning something big. I can't say much, but I thought maybe you'd know what to do." Jack sighed, the weight of the town's troubles settling heavily on his shoulders. "Listen, Tommy, if you're mixed up with these guys, it's not too late to step away. But you have to be honest with me." Tommy swallowed hard, hesitating, and Jack could see the struggle playing out behind his eyes. They said it's just one last job. Something with the warehouse by the train tracks. After that, I'm out. Jack knew a promise like that from men like Viper was worth nothing. He placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder. "You're not the first kid they've roped in with talk like that. But I'll tell you what, you don't have to do this alone." Tommy nodded, visibly relieved but still skittish. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Really." As Tommy disappeared into the night, Jack turned back toward his house, his mind racing. He wasn't sure yet how he'd stop them, but he knew one thing. If the bikers wanted a war, he'd be ready. Jack quickly ushered Tommy inside, glancing down the street before closing the door. "What's going on, Tommy?" he asked. The young man's words spilled out in a rush. He'd gotten tangled up with the gang for easy cash, but now he was in over his head and scared for his life. "They're bringing in a huge shipment tomorrow night at the old airstrip outside of town," Tommy stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "But it's not just drugs. There's something else, something they're really edgy about." Jack's mind whirred. This could be the break they needed to bring the whole operation down, but it was risky. "Listen, Tommy, you're staying here tonight. Don't tell a soul where you are. Not even Sarah." Once Tommy settled into the spare room, Jack dialed Sheriff Hansen, and they agreed to meet at sunrise to figure out their next steps. But as Jack lay down to sleep, a nagging feeling crept over him. It felt like they were overlooking something important. The next day flew by in a blur of tense preparation. Jack and Hansen gathered the few deputies they could trust, but they were painfully outnumbered. As dusk settled over the town, they headed toward the old airstrip, the desert breeze laced with a promise of violence. When they arrived, the place seemed abandoned. The rusting hangars loomed in the fading light, casting long shadows across the cracked tarmac. Jack's instincts screamed that something was off. "Too quiet," he murmured to Hansen. "They should be here by now." Then chaos erupted. Blinding lights flooded the airstrip, momentarily dazzling them. The roar of motorcycles filled the air as bikers seemed to emerge from every shadow. And there, at the center of it all, was the biker boss from the gas station, his face twisted in a smug grin. "Well, well," he called out, his voice dripping with mockery. "Looks like the soldier boy brought friends to the party." Jack's heart sank. How did they know? Then it struck him. Tommy. It had all been a trap. As the gang closed in, weapons glinting in the harsh lights, Jack realized they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. He exchanged a tense glance with Hansen. Whatever happened next, this was the moment everything had been leading up to. The biker boss stepped forward, his voice carrying across the tarmac. "I warned you to walk away, soldier. Now you're gonna find out why nobody crosses us in lives to talk about it." Jack's hand hovered near his concealed weapon, every muscle coiled tight. He knew that what happened in the next heartbeat would decide not only his fate but the fate of the whole town. The air crackled with tension, neither side willing to make the first move. In the distance, a lone coyote howled, a haunting echo that seemed to capture the grimness of the moment. As Jack held the biker boss's gaze, his mind raced through every possible option, searching for any way out that didn't end in bloodshed. But deep down, he knew some battles could only be won through conflict. The biker boss's hand inched toward his jacket, where the outline of a gun was visible. Jack's fingers twitched, ready to draw. The world seemed to freeze, suspended on a knife's edge, waiting to see who'd break the stalemate. Just as the scene was about to erupt, the blare of sirens split the night. The biker boss's sneer faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Jack's mind raced. He hadn't called for backup. Who was coming? The sirens grew louder. And then, out of nowhere, a fleet of police vehicles stormed onto the airstrip, lights blazing and sirens wailing. But these weren't local cops. The cars bore the insignia of the state police and the DEA. In the ensuing chaos, Jack spotted a familiar face stepping out of one of the league vehicles. It was. Jack ushered Tommy inside, casting a wary glance at the empty street before locking the door. "What's going on, Tommy?" he asked, his tone tense but calm. Tommy's words spilled out in a panicked rush. He'd gotten tangled up with a gang for quick cash, but things had spiraled out of control. Now he was in way over his head, fearing for his life. "They're bringing in a big shipment tomorrow night," Tommy stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "It's not just drugs, though. There's something else. They're really on edge about it. The airstrip outside town. It's all going down there." Jack's mind raced. This could be the break they needed to bring down the gang's operation, but the risk was undeniable. He gripped Tommy's shoulder. "Stay here tonight, all right? Don't tell a soul, not even Sarah." As Tommy settled into the spare room, Jack made a quick call to Sheriff Hansen, and they agreed to meet at first light. But as he tried to sleep that night, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were overlooking something critical. The next day was a blur of preparation. Jack and Hansen gathered a few trusted deputies, but they were sorely outnumbered. As dusk settled over the desert, they headed out to the abandoned airstrip, the cool wind carrying a hint of looming violence. When they arrived, the place was eerily silent. Old hangars stood like dark sentries under the dimming sky. Jack's instincts kicked in. "Too quiet," he murmured to Hansen, his hand unconsciously moving toward his sidearm. Then, out of nowhere, a flood of lights hit them, blinding in the dark. The roar of motorcycles filled the air as bikers emerged from every direction. At the center of it all stood the gang leader from the gas station, his face split into a triumphant sneer. "Look who decided to bring friends to the party," he taunted, and then it hit Jack. Tommy had set them up from the beginning. Betrayal stung, but there was no time to process it as the gang closed in, weapons glinting in the harsh light. Outgunned and outnumbered, Jack exchanged a grim look with Hansen. This was the moment it had all been leading to. The gang leader stepped forward, hand hovering near his jacket where the shape of a gun bulged. "I gave you a chance, soldier," he spat. "Now you're gonna learn what it means to cross us." Jack's hand was a twitch away from his weapon, every muscle coiled and ready. The air felt electric, charged with the tension of impending violence. Somewhere in the distance, a lone coyote howled, echoing the somber gravity of the standoff. Just when it seemed like all hell was about to break loose, sirens pierced the tense silence. The gang leader's confident smirk faltered as a convoy of police vehicles appeared, lights flashing. But these weren't local cops. The markings on the cars were unmistakable. State police, and even the DEA. Chaos erupted as officers poured onto the airstrip. In the midst of the confusion, Jack saw a familiar figure step out of one of the lead vehicles. Sarah, her eyes wide with fear and determination. Beside her stood Tommy, looking torn between terror and relief. Realizing he'd been outsmarted, the gang leader barked orders. "Scatter. Get the shipment out of here." But as his men scrambled, Jack seized the moment, tackling the leader to the ground. They grappled in the dirt, each struggling for control. The leader landed a punch, but Jack's military training took over. In one swift move, he pinned the man, locking his arms. All around, the airstrip had erupted into a frenzy. Sheriff Hansen and his deputies joined the fray, working alongside the state troopers to bring down the gang. As Jack tightened the cuffs on the gang leader, Sarah rushed over. "Jack, I'm so sorry," she said, breathless. "Tommy told me everything. We couldn't just let you walk into a trap. I called my cousin with the state police." Jack's eyes narrowed, processing her words. "That was a huge risk, Sarah," he said, a mix of admiration and concern in his tone. Then he turned to Tommy, who stood, guilt-ridden. "How did you know where we'd be?" Tommy swallowed hard. I told her. Couldn't let them hurt you, Jack. I couldn't go through with it." Before Jack could respond, an explosion shook the airstrip. An old hangar went up in flames, black smoke billowing into the night. The acrid smell stung his nose. "The shipment!" The gang leader shouted, struggling against the cuffs. "You fools have no idea what you've done." A state trooper approached, her face grim. "We need to evacuate." "That's not just drugs burning. We're reading highly volatile compounds in there. This whole place could blow any second." As the order spread, Jack looked at Sarah and Tommy. "Get out of here. Now. It's too dangerous." Then, turning to the trooper, he said, "I'm going in. There might still be people trapped inside, and we can't let all that evidence burn." Without waiting for a response, Jack charged toward the burning hangar. The heat was brutal, smoke filling his lungs as he navigated through the blaze. Amidst the chaos, he found 2 gang members pinned beneath a fallen beam, and quickly pulled them to safety. Deeper inside, he spotted a metal container half hidden by flames. His instincts screamed this was what they'd been searching for. Just as he reached it, another explosion rocked the structure. The roof groaned, sections beginning to collapse. With seconds to spare, Jack grabbed what he could from the container, a laptop and some documents, and sprinted back toward the exit. Outside, emergency crews were battling to contain the inferno. Paramedics attended to the wounded, and police rounded up the remaining gang members. As Jack stumbled out of the smoke, evidence clutched in his hands, Sarah rushed over, her face filled with relief. Even as he handed the documents to the DEA, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play. The gang leader's parting words echoed in his mind. What exactly had they stumbled upon? And who was really pulling the strings? As dawn broke over the desert, casting an eerie glow over the smoldering airstrip, Jack knew that the night's events were just the beginning. The fight had only started, and it was about to reveal something far bigger than any of them could imagine. In the days that followed, the quiet town buzzed with activity. State and federal agents sifted through the airstrip's remains, piecing together evidence, interrogating gang members, and unearthing the extent of the operation. Jack, still at the center of it all, worked alongside them to unravel the vast network of crime and corruption. The laptop and documents he'd salvaged were invaluable. They exposed connections stretching far beyond the town, high-ranking officials, neighboring states, all tangled in webs of drug trafficking and money laundering. But the deeper they dug, the more Jack sensed something crucial still lurked in the shadows. Then, one evening, as he pored over evidence in Hanson's office, Sarah burst in, breathless with urgency. Tommy remembered something else, she said. He heard the boss mention a failsafe, hidden in the old mine outside of town. Jack's instincts flared to life. This could be the final piece they were missing. Within the hour, they had assembled a team and set out for the abandoned mine, the desert night concealing their approach. As they entered the dark tunnels, flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls, Jack felt a familiar tingle of anticipation. Whatever lay hidden in these depths, he was ready to face it. The final moments of Jack's journey in this town brought him a sense of peace and belonging that had eluded him for years. After the chaos of the biker gang's threat, the bomb scare, and the dangers that lurked beneath the surface, Jack had slowly started to see this place as more than just a temporary stop. It had transformed into something much more profound, a home, a community, a place where he could heal and give back. The town had faced its darkest hour, and through their collective will, they had risen above it. Jack's efforts to integrate into the town, whether through teaching self-defense to the youth or volunteering on the construction of the community center, had built bonds that would last a lifetime. And as the town rallied together, there was a palpable sense of resilience in the air, a reminder that the worst was behind them. Yet, even with this new sense of purpose, the shadows of the past never truly faded. The text message that had haunted Jack remained a lingering presence. It was a reminder that danger could strike again at any moment. But Jack had changed, evolved. He was no longer just the soldier fighting for survival. He was now a man who fought for something greater, his community, his future, and the promise that the bad days were behind them. As the sun rose, casting its light over the desert, Jack knew that this was just the beginning. There would be new challenges, but he was no longer facing them alone. With Sarah, Tommy, Sheriff Hanson, and the rest of the town by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. Together, they'd stand strong, united, and unwavering. This wasn't just a story of one man's redemption. It was the story of a town finding its way out of the darkness and into the light. And Jack, once an outsider, had found his place in the heart of it all.